Hi everybody, welcome to this session as part of DIVA Lesbian Visibility Week, where we're looking at experiences across the globe. My name's Claire Harvey, most of you know me, but I want to introduce you to these amazingly interesting people, much more interesting than me. Judith and Bibi, I'll let them introduce themselves in a minute. We're going to talk about experiences around the world, and then we'll be giving you a chance to ask some questions as well. So Judith, do you want to start by introducing yourself?
All right. Hi. Thank you, Claire. It's very good to meet you. Hi, Bibi. It's good to meet you as well. So my name is Judith. I'm from Lagos. I reside in Lagos in Nigeria. My name is Judith. I think I said that already. Yeah, I am the stakeholder engagement officer for the BC Alimi Foundation. The BC Alimi Foundation is an LGBT-based foundation, which is for promoting social acceptance in Nigeria. It's based in the UK, but all the operations are here in Nigeria. I'm also a mother. I have a son, he's 7, and I bake. I also have a company right here in Nigeria, and I'm a very, very good pastry chef. So yeah, that's about me.
Thanks, Judith. I've got lots of questions already, but let's introduce Bibi first.
Hi, so I'm at the top of the world in Iqaluit, Nunavut, which is northern Canada. We're a fly-in only community, and I've lived here for 7 years. And actually, before I lived in Iqaluit, I lived in Ghana for 4 years, so it's really nice to have the West African connection. I learned a lot about myself living in Ghana, and actually there's a lot of West Africans in Iqaluit. We are only 7,000 people here. It's an Inuit indigenous territory. We have 25 communities. Iqaluit's the sort of the capital and the hub, and it's very diverse. We have people from all over the world, a lot of queer people as well. So it's a really, really interesting place, and even though we're in the Arctic, we kind of almost represent the whole world as well. So I do a variety of things. I work at a college with students, and I do recruitment and education, as well as run our little queer groups called Positive Space, and that's started at the high school. And so because of colonization here, it's very homophobic. So the youth growing up are very queer and very open. So we thought if we just taught the kids leadership skills, and they're naturally have been growing up sort of without even just the LGBTQ label. They've just grown up experimenting with gender, experimenting with sexuality. So we really wanted to just develop that sort of freedom and empowering them through confidence. And that's been really great. And then I also do a lot of comedy. So I'm a comedian and producer, and I'm autistic. So I have a blog called Asper Girl, and that's sort of like my main project. That's
brilliant. Thank you. Now, probably like most people, I'm now thinking about how can I move to that place very, very quickly. In terms of us culturally kind of unlearned people, what does being in an Inuit community actually mean and look like? Do people live in huts? How does it work?
No, I mean, the colonization began here, about 100 years ago, but pretty much in the last 50 years, people were forcibly relocated. And a lot of this history, it's a really sad history, and it's not widely known around Canada. So actually why I moved here 7 years ago was because I didn't know anything, and I'm the kind of person where if I don't know something, if it's just a big, Nunavut is really half our country, but we are not told anything about it, and that really scared me in a way. I'm like, what's happening here? So I literally bought a one-way plane ticket, and there's 25 settled communities, there's roads, everyone lives in houses. People do know how to make igloos. We have one outside that I've been playing in, but it is a very Western lifestyle, which unfortunately is not practical for, I guess, the Arctic. So Inuit are still in that transition period where they're trying to maintain their culture in the face of, you know, having to adapt to a very Western system, which I think was another reason why there's a lot of immigrants here. And for me as a queer person, I'm always rebelling against the system. So I think queers, immigrants, and Inuit, we get along really, really well. So it's like a really nice multicultural, check your privilege all of the time, or just trying to share and learn from each other. So yeah, it's really neat, but also we can't ignore that there is like the real work is really, really starting, especially in the fact that we live in an Arctic nation where we're losing a lot of our ice. We're losing, you know, we see global warming every day. It's really impacting us. So we're not in the phase where you can be like, oh yeah, it's not happening. Like it is happening. So we're trying to protect our culture, but at the same time, retransition to something better, in a nutshell.
Fascinating. Yeah. And Judith, we were talking just before we started around that kind of that cultural melting pot and the tensions that are around in Nigeria as well. What is it like for you living in Lagos?
Okay, living in Lagos pre-COVID-19 is pretty interesting. It's a very commercial city. We've got over 40 million people here in Lagos. It's amazing because a lot of people come from other states. We have about 36 states in Nigeria, and you can be sure that you have a representative of each state here in Lagos, not just in Lagos, in your neighborhood. It's a very, very busy state. There's always a lot of traffic. When it comes to interpersonal relationships, you have a lot of people that are distant because we don't have that community living except in your street or in in your streets or basically in your estate where you live. Then you can have to associate with other people or at work. In church, or, you know, at the gym. Those are the places where you get to go out and meet people, or you're actually just hanging out at the clubs or bars. Other than that, people live a very individualistic lifestyle, you know. People have a lot of trust issues here. You're not going to see someone just like Bibi says, you're not going to have someone that says, oh, because I'm from another state and I'm queer, then we become friends. No way. We don't agree on that because we have a lot of prejudices when it comes to our nature. We have our cultural biases, we have our political biases, we have the religious biases, which is even worse because you have a lot of Nigerians that are so religion based, and they cannot seem to accept anything else other than what the religion teaches. So there's a lot of hurdles that we need to cross living here in Nigeria. And then of course you have the cultural differences. You have people from different dialects, speaking different dialects, different origins, you know, having their own wars and having their own clashes. But we just do what we have to do to just stay safe, stay sane, love who we love, and, you know, just leave everybody else out of it. And then we try our possible best, even as a foundation. You know, we try as much as we can to involve these political stakeholders. We look at people at the police level, we look at the religious leaders, we look at people who are also high in their spheres of influence. You know, we have to look at them and say, look, what can we do to change certain policies that are affecting the queer people here in Nigeria? What can we do differently? How can we make people, you know, accept us socially? We're not asking for too much. We're saying, look, we just want to have the freedom to go outside and have a drink, and somebody doesn't have a homophobic attack on us. It's really, really rampant here in Nigeria. There's a lot of also internal homophobia going on. So the list is endless. It's a huge country with so many people, with so many problems, and we just have to take it one day at a time, basically.
And in terms of that, you know, it's the kind of political commentary around Nigeria and parts of Africa, you know, is well rehearsed in terms of kind of homophobia and politicized homophobia. Do you see that moving, or do you see that getting worse at the moment?
I would like to say I see it moving. That I would personally, in my opinion, like to say I would see it moving, and that is because people are slowly moving from the point where they are being negative minded towards other people because of their sexual orientation or identity, towards accepting them for who they are, irregardless, because over time we've found out that people are beginning to accept us because you just realize that probably your brother or your cousin is closeted. And you know, when it comes home, the reaction changes. For some reason, you love me because I'm your brother, and then you hate me once I'm someone else. And then when you look at the political sector of this, you have the SSMPA, the Same-Sex Marriage Prohibition Act, that was enacted years ago, and it's still very much in the system. And a lot of us don't understand this act that was put into law. A lot of us don't understand it. So a lot of police are acting out on these laws with ignorance. They are acting out on it in the overview of it. Oh, we're going to jail anybody that says he's LGBT for 14 years, and that's it. They're not looking at what the act actually says, what the law actually says regarding the SSMPA Act. Now, it's so rampant that there's a lot of, you know, discrimination, there's a lot of unlawful arrests, you know, there's a lot of, and then you take these cases to court and you cannot actually charge them. Why? Because the law is the act itself is very clear on what is the expectation for you to be jailed. And of course, we know that when these things are taken to court, like there are no strong evidences to say this person has for instance, you say, or the law says if you have an amorous relationship with someone, then you're going to jail for 14 years. I can be walking down the road with my sister or my friend and I can hold a hand or hold a shoulder. Then why does that make me a lesbian? Why would you have to use such words to connote a kind of relationship? You know, so you have things like that. And then it's not easy because, you know, in some states, like the Sharia states up in the north, where you have hanging and death as the penalty for such acts, it gets really tense because nobody's able to come out and say, this is who I am. Very few, very little, step by step, people are beginning to show up and say, this is, and I think one of the major things that I can say is because we are beginning to form a synergy and say, look, let us all speak with this voice and let's all move forward as one. If you're attacking me, you're attacking the rest of us. So with that, you have more people, you know, kind of accepting who we are, just going forward, and people are just shying away from everything that's going to put you into trouble with the law, basically. So that's where we are.
Yeah, it's hard listening to, and I guess Bibi, you're much where we are in the UK. You know, we've got laws, we've got kind of much better protection legally, but we know that the lived experience can be hugely different. What's it like being an LGBT person for you, I guess?
Well, I grew up in Toronto, which is one of the which is one of the most, you know, progressive, and I guess I grew up near Church and Wellesley, which is the gayborhood, and, you know, and still is. So I knew about the queer identity, but growing up in the 90s, and I've always been like very girly and a musical theater nerd, so I didn't understand that world was, you know, that was who I was, because I didn't see that visible representation for me. I relate so much to your experiences in Nigeria, because I did live in Ghana for a number of years. I worked with at a boys' school, and in the north of Ghana, you know, which is there was, of course, no bars, no gay presence there, and it's very similar also in Nunavut. Like the rest of Canada, we have laws. We are quite progressive when it comes to LGBTQ rights, but the cultural presence, the history of colonization here is much more similar to the experience of Ghana, in places, where there's just each of these tiny communities. Here in Iqaluit, we have 7,000 people, and I don't even know how many different churches. I think there's 9, and each community is very similar. So even though we have laws, what I'm trying to do is educate the teachers, the healthcare workers, those who come to the North, and to remind them that even though there is so much stigma in the communities around being gay, and everybody's closeted, and there's so much cultural stigma, we do live in Canada, and we have it's these children, these people's human rights to be who they are. And when they go to school, when they're accessing medical care, when they're in public spaces, they have rights, and we need to let them know. And a lot of the time it's just miseducation. And I came out to there was 26 boys that I was caring for, and when I first talked to them in Ghana, they were very against gay people. But after 7 years of having a relationship with them, when I introduced them to my partner, it was the humanizing experience. So I think a lot of the time it's just the representation that people are seeing. It's easy to oppress them and to get them to think that gay people are aliens, they're bad, they're evil, but we're wonderful people. And it's just the more that we can just face discrimination and continue to be kind and live our lives is making a huge difference, at least I've seen in the North. And again, I'm not Inuk, so one of the things that I tell people when they're moving here is that they're so used to people coming and going, and almost like leaving a mess when they leave. That's why I'm committed to staying here. So if you're going to be here, you have to. It's your privilege to at least partake and be open and just do whatever you can, because I think people don't realize, especially like Southern Canadians coming up to the North, is that it does leave huge damage. And I noticed that too when I lived in Ghana, how many white people would just come and take pictures with animals and then leave, and they're not realizing like these are people's lives, and you have to be accountable for that. So I'm seeing with the younger children growing up that at first I was hesitant to get involved because I felt like, oh, it's not my place, I don't want to be another Southerner. But as the kids told me when I was working at the high school, it's like, you grew up with a gayborhood, you grew up with queer arts, and you grew up with this, like, show us how to do that. And then so there's a difference between like enforcing, but also just providing, getting the kids to enjoy the work and figure out who they are, and then they can contribute. Because I think what's happening up here, we can really learn from the rest of Canada and the rest of the world. I was on the board of Canada Pride, and there's so much politics within Pride. You have the L's, and you have the G's, and the B's, and the T's. Everybody's so separate, and there's so much privilege within that. But this, again, in Indigenous culture with Two-Spirit and fluidity, people are, there's so much that we can learn about how to come together. So that's the other thing, I don't want to bring the pride necessarily up here. We don't need the party all the time. Like, it's so important to get back to the togetherness and getting in touch with ourselves as humans. And I think that's what I've really learned here, is that the community exists with or without like the acronym, with or without the party. So yeah, that's what I love about being here.
Yeah, it's so true. That whole, I often think as a community, we're our own worst enemy, because we're so busy fighting ourselves that actually we're leaving other people the easy job. And, some of the racism and some of the sexism and some of the, all of the things that we want other people to do, I just don't think we do very well ourselves in our own community. And this week we're very much focusing on, whilst we're social distancing, actually how do we make sure the whole community is in the tent, and how do we make sure we're lifting each other up, rather than kind of creating that hierarchical pecking order that we are a part of externally within our own community. And I guess leading on for that, given that it's this focus is all about women, when you think about representation and that how important that representation is to help people both understand, empathize, and connect. When you think, Judith, about representation in your experience, where do women sit in that? Do women have a voice in that LGBT community and in the wider representation?
For me personally, we do the best we can as an individual and as a community and as a foundation to enrich people's lives within the community. And I think if we can win one, then we can move on. You know, it's one life at a time, one person at a time. Presently, in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, there's a lot of social distancing. I'm stuck at home. And so what we've done as a foundation, for instance, we started to do this mental health, having webinars on mental health, having webinars on fake news, daily meditations, you know, come together, let us meditate. Let's, you know, just take your mind away from everything that is happening. Little by little, step by step, you're able to, you know, make a difference or make a change, or, you know, being able to cope with the situation at hand. And as a woman here in Nigeria, there's really nothing much I can say I can do because I am restricted. I'm within the confines of my house. But I mean, just like you're doing right now, having this webinar is exactly the same thing. We're going on the webinars, informing people about things they need to know when it comes to dealing with this pandemic, dealing with their mental health, you know, going on online courses, you know, introducing them to trainings, things they can do to empower themselves, because there is also the post-COVID-19 era. There is also a time when this is going to be over and you have to evaluate yourself. We're not asking you to do so much, but as an LGBT person in Nigeria, it is already very, very difficult living. And I know that for sure because I am in different social groups. We chat on WhatsApp and things like that. And I know the pressures that they are getting in. It's stifling. The longer the lockdown is, the tighter it gets. And I told them, I said, look, come online, let's do this meditation, let's talk, you know, let's help each other. You need to hold hands to lift each other up. So if I'm able to lift you up, you can be able to lift someone else up. It just takes that. You were talking about being in Ghana. Actually, my girlfriend is in Ghana. And right now she's on lockdown and she's going through some health issues, and I have to keep talking to her. And it's the same thing I tell people. I say, look, you have relationships, you build relationships, if they don't have to be emotional or anything, but that relationship you have with someone, this is a good time to work on it. This is a good time to reach out. This is a good time to check on this person and be sure that this person is okay. Let them pour their hearts to you. Let them talk to you. Let them be able to say, oh, I've got Judith in this time of crisis, and let it just be what it is. So that for me, it's the best I will do, and I'll continue to do, you know, as much as I can.
In which case, Judith, you're going to love, later in the week, there is a session on keeping the romance alive when you are either living together all of the time in isolation, or exactly in your situation, you're having to isolate in separate places. How do you keep that spark going? So be sure to tune in for that one. And what about you, Bibi? What is the difference between, in relation to being a woman in this environment, I guess?
It's so interesting. I feel like it you know, in every I navigate so many different spaces, so I'm always going through these different like power struggles and learning. So I think like within Nunavut, it's a very patriarchal culture. So I know that especially right now, with the social distancing and a lot of people working from home, I don't have any kids. I live with my wife. And I know from my friends who have children, they're facing a lot of difficulty with navigating like the gender roles about like child rearing and all of those things, which is interesting because it's, you know, 2020 and we're still having these conversations in terms of gender roles, and especially within the LGBTQ community. As I mentioned before, I was on the board of Canada Pride, and we just went through a big restructuring, which was really interesting to see, again, how in the global space, it's still usually predominantly white men who are at the table, white, Eurocentric. I know going to Interpride in Athens in October, that was my first time on the international pride scene, and it's mostly Americans, mostly Europeans and Canadians, and this was the first year that they tried to get more of the African diaspora and Asia Pacific diaspora region there, and it just opens this whole other door of like, when we bring people in, usually they're not equipped to, like, our spaces are still in a very white man-centric way. So even, if we want to have women, if we want to have diversity within our spaces, we need to have the training, we need to have the connection, and we need to actually restructure. I'm always really hesitant to get involved in organizations because I'm autistic. My mind is completely different than the norm. So I always say, if you want me at this space, you're going to have to be prepared to accommodate how I think. It's not the who's at the table that's the problem, it's the table in general that's the problem. We don't want to, like, again, Nunavut is so much more similar to Africa, but a lot of Nunavumi do not, like, they want to believe that their culture, which it is very distinct, but I'm always like, no, it's not that you as Inuit are similar to Africa, but your history is very similar. So we can learn so much from how Africans have responded to colonization and some of the problems that are still happening. Because even though Nunavut is an Indigenous territory, we're still very tied to the same system of Canada, and that's causing the same power dynamics to occur. Most of our resources are not remaining in our territory. So that's happening within the community. So I'm very mindful of that, like as a woman and as an autistic woman, to constantly be reevaluating and making sure that we don't have this, patriarchal mindset, and also, that I don't internalize my own ableism either. So that's kind of what I bring to the perspective. Is I think also people assume that I'm one way. I definitely get put into a lot of positions of power because people think that I look very naive and then I'm just going to go along with things. And then when they realize, oh, wait a minute, she has a voice and she doesn't actually like what we're doing and she's going to challenge us. And so I do feel that a lot, whereas we make a lot of decisions based on stereotyping people, and then when you're not who people think that you are, then there's friction and it's quite isolating. So I think within our own community, I've definitely faced that a lot, also as a comedian as well, and navigating arts spaces as a woman, as a queer woman within queer spaces, and also in heteronormative spaces. I see a lot of the same patterns, and I think it's because we're not intentionally doing it, but that's the way our system has worked for so long. So hopefully I'm always trying to see the positives. So these kinds of engagements over online and doing different things to connect people, especially those of us who are historically marginalized and kept in the shadows. I think this is, we don't have to go back to the old ways of doing once this pandemic lifts. While there are a lot of challenges, we can still meet over conference and we can still connect with people in other countries and lift these voices up too.
I couldn't agree more. It's not just about getting people around the table. It's really also listening and understanding and building that empathy, and then being willing to change the rhythms and the ways that we do things so that everybody can thrive and everyone can feel valued. And throughout this week, we're launching, we did a survey and we're launching the findings of survey of what women feel in this space. And it's very much echoing what both of you are saying. It's around having that connection and not just wanting to be invited for the sake of being invited, but making sure what's being discussed, what's being offered is actually really relevant and really helpful at the time, rather than just the way of doing it. So I have one last question before we go to the live questions, because I know people are going to have a million things they want to ask you both. And I guess my one question to end on that positive note that I'm hearing from both of you is, this is a big community. This has unintentionally created a really big, diverse, strong community that perhaps we didn't know was out there. And what would be your ask of that community in order to make your lived experience where you live, what you see around you, a slightly better place, a slightly easier place for both you and the next generation? What would be your simple ask of the people who are listening today and thinking, well, I've got time on my hands, what can I do? Judith, I'm going to go to you.
All right. Thank you, Claire. I think for me, the simplest thing I'll just say is just reach out and love. It's so easy. It's the easiest thing you could possibly do. I know that a lot of us are going to be going through a lot of pressure, the pressure of social distancing, the pressure of, the virus itself, the pressure of being in lockdown. Like Bibi said, you've got kids, money issues, financial management, job losses, political, misgivings. I mean, the list is endless. Just stay true to yourself. Love. If you live alone or you're living with someone, just reach out, take a walk. Just take a walk, come back, do some exercise, get in tune with your social media. Avoid fake news, because you need your mental health at the end of the day, which is the most important thing. Get in contact, do an online course, do a training, something to enrich yourself. And if none of this is available, just log on and watch a movie. It can't get so serious, just take the time out and, just live a day at a time. Take it one day at a time. Don't rush it. Don't rush the process. Don't be anxious. Try to manage. And if you can, meditate. Meditation really, really helps. It just takes 5 to 10 minutes or 15 minutes of your day. It calms you, calms your nerves, and you're able to go on the rest of your day. So that's my top tip.
And I guess whilst you're wandering the internet and wondering what to do, you want people to be looking up the Bisilelumi Foundation, don't you, Judith?
Yes, we do. So basically, if you go on our website, you would see links to the different webinars we have. Last week we had 2 weeks when the COVID-19 started, a couple of 14 days ago, we had the webinar on the COVID-19 pandemic, the effects, what you need to do, things you need to, do and avoid so that you can be really save this period. We also had someone come in to talk on mental health. We had a doctor come in to talk on mental health. How do you know that you're going through a good mental health order? You're not depressed, you're not anxious, you're not afraid, and how to deal with it. Also, we have the videos on there. It's free. You can just click on it. And this Saturday, we're having another lady coming to talk on fake news, the impact of fake news. There's a lot of news traveling all over the world. I mean, we're having numbers here and numbers there. It's going up, it's coming down. People going back after they've been discharged from COVID-19. I mean, I saw that today, South Korea, people that have gone back to the isolation centers after they have been discharged. So we need to know, how do you identify fake news without getting so anxious, without, scaring yourself silly during this pandemic. And then we have our daily webinars for meditation every 9 o'clock. Please feel free to join us. It's for everyone worldwide. You can just log in. It's for 5-10 minutes. And then we just start our days from there.
Brilliant. Thank you, Judith. And Bibi, what about you?
That sounds amazing, Judith. I want to do the meditation. I
Awesome.
guess, yeah, I've been doing a lot of online work with my autistic community. And so what I always tell people is just be curious, kind, and creative. So there's so much information online, and there's so many people out there. So just, be curious, learn about something new every day, reach out to somebody, be kind to yourself. I know for me personally, I had a lot of expectations working from home, like, oh, I'm going to get all this stuff done. I'm going to, make videos and this and that. I'm going to, do live stream all my comedy. And, I haven't, it's still life, and we're still have, so many emotions. And I think also recognized, to be, kind to yourself, to grieve for some of the plans that have been canceled. Any loss is loss. So don't compare yourself to other people, and And I think that's been one of the things that I've been talking to with a lot of my friends and my community members, feeling guilty or feeling bad for feeling this way in lockdown because they're not frontline workers, or, you know, just a vacation was canceled. But I think it's really important to realize, like, you know, our lives as we know it are changing, and it's okay to feel lonely. It's okay to feel disappointment, and we're all in the same boat. For me in Nunavut, we're used to social distancing from the rest of Canada. And in a way, it's been really nice to, I have a lot of tips from, you know, people are like, I can't go to bars anymore. I can't go to cafes. I can't, we're like, we don't have that here. So it's nice to share. Yeah, I have a very creative life, which brings me to my last point of, you know, your mind will take you wherever it wants to go and wherever it can go. So just try and nudge it into a positive direction, reach out. There's so many different platforms. Like I just got a TikTok recently. I've been having, you know, fun with that and connecting with different people. And also as an autistic person, online connections are real connections. You know, you don't have to be face to face to have intimacy. You don't have to be in a big social setting for it to be a real social engagement. This, you know, anytime you're exchanging information and real feelings, that's a connection. So I think we need to put emphasis on the fact that there are so many different ways to be connected and united. And for the people that can't connect in these big social group settings for either sensory reasons or discrimination reasons or financial reasons, like this is actually for us a huge opportunity, and it's a really great way to bring people into our world. So I know, like, as one of my autistic friends said, we trained for this. So it's been shedding a lot of light too on like neurodivergent ways of communicating and doing things, because we are finding ways to adapt to mainstream culture all of the time. So it's interesting to, as I said, like when people ask me, how does it feel to be autistic? I'm like, it's having to cope and adjust and change behaviors during a pandemic. That's exactly how I feel every day of my life. So in a way, I kind of think it's interesting to be able to coach other people on how to get through it, and that, you know, you do have to just take it one day at a time and learn as much as you can and be curious about other cultures and kind to yourself. So that's my advice.
Well, thank you both really so much. I feel like it's been a privilege to get to know you, exactly what you were both saying, two people that who knows if our paths are crossed, but certainly I'm really, really grateful that they have today. We're going to put this open to questions now from other people who are listening, but I just really wanted to thank you for your time.
Well, thanks. Yeah, thanks for including me.
Thank you so much, Claire.